Howdy folks, we're looking at Edge Magazine issue 24, released September 1995, and discussing, yet again, the future of interactive entertainment. So we have a horrendous cover, and this is the third cover in a row I don't like, because the last one was with the chips, and that didn't look that good too, and the one before that was simply M2. So, and the next one will also be rather disappointing. So, I don't know what was with Edge in 1995. This time they're featuring motion trackers, which is kind of interesting. But this was late 1995. Should have been a lot of interesting games. What I did like is how the inside of their covers are getting more and more artistic. That's kind of fun. I'm going to take a sneak peek at what they had at the other side. And here, Edge. So the needles become flagpoles. Okay. And Miyamoto is being shown in the opening column, and it's about how, hey, the Super Nintendo might just be the best system still with games like Yoshi's Island. I mean, Edge kind of turned a 180. They've continuously dismissed the Super Nintendo, and now all of a sudden they're like, yeah, well, come to think of it, most of the games coming from 32-bit systems have been rather fluff. I mean, a couple of good racing games like the Need for Speed and Ridge Racer fighting games, Virtua Fighter Tekken. And what else? I mean, Tempest 2000. I mean, there haven't been really... Yeah, of course, there's Doom. That was a PC game. I don't know if that counts. So the 32-bit systems haven't proven that much so far. And Super Nintendo still going strong. So here are the contents. Football games. Motion captures, 3D Realms article on them, just before they released Duke Nukem 3D. Yoshi's Island, Virtual Boy, and this guy, he worked for Nintendo, maybe still works, I don't know, and he has Bowls of Steel. It's going to be fun looking at what he has to say. Okay, so 3DO, their M2 has to be shown, like they always do in Edge, every month, and this time they're showing a list of games that might be released, like Descent, Disruptor, Return Fire 2, Top Gun, Wing Commander 4, John Madden. So a lot of people apparently going to make games for the M2 with graphics like these. So, but that never happened. Okay, so Edge saying that the Saturn release has some mixed blessings, but there are two main points of this article. Basically, the Saturn being released earlier, which I don't think is a problem, and second of all, the system more or less selling out, which I don't think is a problem either. I mean, okay, if you couldn't get it for some reason, well, at least it was released earlier, so maybe you'll get it around the same time as you originally planned. Well, there's actually a third thing, which is also good news. The European releases would have comparable images. Usually the PAL versions of games get squashed because of the difference in the frequency, but here it's closer. Although, especially the fighters look different size. Anyhow. So less black borders on the Saturn in Europe. So that was also a good thing. The Pippin, made by Bandai, would apparently have 40 games being released by 300 different developers. Well, I don't know if that actually happened, but the Pippin was not a success, I can tell you that. Pretty cool joypad though, and the boomerang. See that? The mouse in the middle. Kind of echoing the control of the Nintendo 64. Okay, so the Virtual Boy is shown for the first time, its games at least. And yeah, we see games like Mario's Tennis and Red Alarm, Mario Clash, which was like Mario Brothers. And well, Edge isn't impressed, saying the games look like 8-bit games, but maybe I have good gameplay. I mean, the Game Boy was a huge thing, and that also looked rather pedestrian. Here's a Legend of Zelda, which you can get by satellite in Japan, and ROM hackers love using this. So, yeah, it's not really a sequel to A Link to the Past, but it was pretty cool. rather blatant commercial and made by Saturn about, you know, the monkey keeps playing the Saturn game, but the monkey with the PlayStation, he walks away. Well, that's kind of stupid. Okay, so the war for the DVD continues, apparently. It was Philips and Sony versus everybody else, and I believe Sony and Philips won. But at the time, people were wondering, what kind of format would we get? PlayStation being reasonably priced, and a new racing game called Indy 500, which Edge says wasn't as good as Namco's racing game Ace Driver. I've never heard of it, actually, to be honest. This book they're discussing is about why digital is better than material, like how CDs are better than videotape. So, some kind of conference. Here are the letters. Well, Edge, apparently, they released a 16-page additional magazine discussing all the new systems coming out. I don't have that, unfortunately. And later, a year later, they have one only featuring the Jaguar and its CD. And this was paid for by Atari. But it's not an advertisement because, according to Edge, they never had Atari review what they had made. So all Atari wanted was Edge to write more about the Jaguar in a supplement. And according to Edge, they stuck to their to their honest opinions. And there's a person who laments this, and Edge goes totally defensive. I don't like it, to be honest, when game companies pay for content in Edges and in magazines like this. I mean, advertisements, fine, of course. I love that. I love seeing all the advertisements. I want magazines to be paid well. But, of course, how are you going to be negative about somebody who's paying for your own content? So, and if I had seen magazines always stick to the truth, then I would be okay with this, but I've seen too often funny review scores for games that simply didn't belong, and it's obvious that the review scores were altered because of the money involved. Oh, somebody having a hard time getting into the industry, or this person got into the industry, but one of the writers. And another person saying, yeah, the SNES is going strong. What else do we have? Yes, about the letterbox near the top of the... Hey, look, we have the head for MTV. Remember that? That was a really cool comic book inspired animation TV cartoon series by MTV, and it was totally freaky, and you had to watch it in the 90s, and it was so cool. And you also had the Max, so you had the head and the Max. Look them up on YouTube. They are fabulous. And yeah, in this story you have an alien who lives in the head of somebody. Okay, Edge Online. It's a shame you don't have that anymore. Edge has never been good at their website. Just doesn't seem to stick. Okay, Tekken 2 being released. Quite an improvement on Part 1. Most of all, the speed. The controls felt better. Second of all, the character designs were better. This game wasn't ugly anymore. Tekken 1 looks really ugly. Tekken 2 looks okay. It's not as good looking as Virtua Fighter 2, but it's much more pleasant to look at. It played nicer. It had better music too, if you asked me. So overall, all-around good game. If I gave Tekken 1 a 5 or a 6, maybe even a 4, I would give Tekken 2 a 7 or an 8. It's not as good as Virtua Fighter 2, but it was a good fighting game, especially for a 3D one. And with Virtua Fighter, with Tekken 3, they got everything right, and I would give that a 9 probably. So Loaded, a top-down shooting game, kind of like Gauntlet, I guess. And I don't know if this was a success. I remember seeing a lot of these images drawn by the heavy metal artist. I don't know their name. But yeah, these images, they stuck out. So I remember this game being advertised for the PlayStation 1. Probably multiplayer. Here's Tilt. I've never heard of this game before. By Virgin, so I guess it was a big thing. And it's a pinball game with polygons instead of sprites. So, but I don't know if this ever caught on. The preview is very enthusiastic. Okay, so Foes of Ali, one of the first boxing games for the PlayStation 1. Oh no, it says here 3DO. I guess I'm confused. Apparently for the 3DO. And I like how they mentioned how during the fight, your opponent would start to bleed and you would start getting a red haze because of the blood in your eyes. I don't know if this was any good. Blade Force. Now I get all those 3DO games confused, and was this game released or not? It's an on-rails shooter, and it looks pretty apparently, but as Edge says, there's not much room for gameplay. So yeah, this game wouldn't be the savior for the 3DO either. 3D Realms. They were going to be very big soon. Now, they released Terminal Velocity, which will be reviewed later on. They had this engine called Build, which was used for Duke Nukem 3D, and that changed the game a bit. I mean, Quake was real 3D. The Build engine was still pseudo 3D, but you can do anything you want, so that was just fine. And I always thought Duke Nukem 3D looked better than Quake, mostly due to the design. I mean, it was still, you had still these sprites, you know, it was still obviously kind of weird, but Quake was so brown and ugly, it didn't make me happy. And later on you had Heretic 2, which looked much better because of better art design. 3D Realms also worked in unison also on Blood and Shadow Warrior, which were very pulp-like games. Blood was more like a horror game, and Shadow Warrior was more like a 70s kung fu game. And Duke Nukem 3D is, of course, the 80s American action genre. So all their movies, they used Hollywood as inspiration, cheap Hollywood movies, and they were a lot of fun. Good times playing 3D Realms games. And then they tried to make those two games. One was Prey and the other Duke Nukem Forever, and they both had a lot of work to do before they were released. Okay, Yoshi's Island, one of the best platforming games ever made. Maybe the best graphics on the Super Nintendo, thanks to the art design, but also the use of the Super FX chip. Fantastic bosses, a lot of good secrets, level design is great, every level is special, the enemies are all worth remembering. So I just wish that it played, I mean, ultimately the most important thing in a platform game is how does your character move, and Super Mario World does it better than this game. The ability to run really fast and fly and hop around, it's not done as well as in Yoshi's Island. Yoshi's Island you spend a lot of time holding down your jump button a little bit longer to reach traps, and it slows down the momentum. It's kind of, I mean, you're glad it's there, but it slows down the momentum, and there's no point in flying in these levels. It's just the design is much more like a tunnel actually. The sprites are also bigger, so it's harder to avoid things, but still just as good as Super Mario World, I guess. But it's doesn't have the same fundamentals. And here's a quick look at Miyamoto's game Mario Brothers. This is the 16-bit version. Super Mario Brothers, Super Mario Brothers 3. These screenshots are all taken from Super Mario All-Stars, so I wish they used the authentic graphics in Super Mario World. And of course other Mario games made by other people. Oh, we're running out of time. So we'll take a look at these advertisements briefly. And next time we'll look at the football games being released soon. So see you then.